Hey everyone, and welcome back with Mrs. Struble. Today we're going to be talking about how to solve simple equations using addition or subtraction. But before you start this video, make sure you have reviewed all of your operations with rational numbers, as well as how to write expressions. So let's go ahead and get started. Solving simple equations is easy. That's why it's called simple equations. But let's just think first. How can we use the relationship between addition and subtraction in order to help solve for a missing number? That's all we're doing here in equations. And in order to answer that, think back to elementary. In elementary, you were taught what I believe they still call is a fact triangle, where you have three numbers that have a relationship using addition and subtraction. For example, if I have 5 plus 3, they equal 8. Or I can do the opposite of that, 8 minus 3, and I get 5. Those three numbers, 3, 5, and 8, are in a relationship called a fact triangle, or an addition and subtraction triangle. Using that knowledge, we can solve simple equations. So in this first example, we have a number plus 12 is equal to 32. Well, we need to find that missing number in that fact triangle. So instead of using addition, we're going to use subtraction. And we're going to take 32 minus 12 to get our answer of 20. And in fact, 20 plus 12 is 32. So it works. Now let's take a look at the second example. We have 8 is equal to some number minus 28. Again, we got to find that missing number in this fact triangle. So we see that there's subtraction going on. Let's do or undo that subtraction using its opposite, which is addition. And we're going to add 8 and 28 to get 36. And 36 minus 28, you guessed it, it's 8. So it works. What are we really doing here is we're actually finding equivalent equations. Okay? Equivalent equations is when we have two or more equations that they mean the same thing. I could say tomato, tomato. They mean the same thing. It all depends on where you're from or how you want to write it in this case. So in the example of equivalent equations, we have x minus 15 equals negative 1. Well, or I could just say x is equal to 14. They're equal in value. They mean the same thing. Another thing I could do is x minus 15 plus 15 is equal to minus 1 or negative 1 minus 15, or excuse me, plus 15. Again, these are equal. It's the same thing that I just wrote. The only thing I did was I added 15 to both sides. Little tidbit, what I just did there was I used the properties of equality. And that's what we use in order to help solve equations too. So the addition property of equality says, hey, if you have a number or an expression equal to another, so A equal to B, if you want, you can add another number to both sides and they're still the same thing, as long as you do the same thing to both sides. Okay, so I always say what we do to one side, we do to the other. And my class just breaks out. They know what they need to say, you know. So that also occurs in subtraction. Okay. If we have something equal to another thing, then we can subtract the same thing on both sides, and it's still equal in expression. We're still meaning the same thing. We're just rewriting it differently. Okay, it's still the same weight. All right, let's break it down to some examples here. Okay, some actual live examples. X minus 5 is equal to negative 1. I think we've already seen something similar to this. So again, we need to find that missing value. So think back to that fact triangle if you have to. Otherwise, we're just using what's called the inverse operation, opposites, And instead of subtracting 5, we're going to add 5 to both sides. This is the addition property of equality, guys. That means we're not changing anything, we're just rewriting it differently. And then we end up, those 5s actually cancel. So what is 5 and minus 5? Well, 5 minus 5 is just 0. So x, or some number plus 0, is always going to be that number. So we end up with x equals something, which is what we want. Okay. And then on the other side of the equal sign, we have a -1 plus 5. Well, that's 4. So we end up with x equals 4. Now remember here, it's only going to get harder from here. So we have to keep in mind our goal. Our ultimate goal when we're solving any equation is to isolate the variable, find out what that missing number is, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do. And again, that just means we're wanting that variable all by itself on one side of the equal sign. All right, let's go ahead and do that next example. Now we're getting into rational numbers. Now don't freak out just because you see a fraction. You know how to do this. Z plus 3/2 is equal to 1/2. Again, we see that addition, so we're going to use that inverse operation, and we're going to subtract 3/2. We want the Z all by himself on one side of the equal sign. So the thing what's in the way from that happening is this 3/2. So subtracting 3/2 from both sides will solve that problem. Subtracting 3/2 over on the left-hand side, those cancel out. We'll end up with Z all by himself. Hey, that's our goal. So now let's see what we have left on the right-hand side. We have 1/2 minus 3/2. Writing it out, 1/2 minus 3/2. And if you remember, that is equal to -2/2, which is just -1. Okay, so Z is equal to -1. Now let's start talking about that second objective, writing equations. Before we do that, we have to first be able to identify some keywords. So we have this little chart here, and we're going to utilize this little chart. And I want you to pause the video, and I want you to think of all of the words, English, or the written words that we can utilize in order to mean that we're adding, that we're subtracting, and the words that could mean the equal sign. Now that you've tried that, let's go ahead and compare. So here are the words that I came up with. And again, you can pause this video at any time so that you can take your time to compare and write any ones that you might have missed. So for addition, I have sum, or the summation of is also another one. Added to, all together. Add in all, a total, increase, more than, and I'm sure I'm missing some. Oh, when you're talking about money, it's deposit. So it kind of depends on the situation that you're doing also with these words. For subtraction, we have minus, greater than, less, or less than. Remember, again, make sure that you're reviewing your writing expressions before this, but less and less than are two different things. Okay, so less, you can just add in that subtraction, no problem. Less than actually means that the value after that is the greater one, so that they need to have that rainbow switch, or flip, however you were taught it. So take away, continuing with the subtraction, take away, subtract, decrease, lost, dropped, subtrahend, difference, descended, okay, is another one, or withdrawal when you're, again, talking about the money situations. For your equal sign, there is the is, that's the one that's generally used, or are. The same as, so is the same as, again, we're using that word is too. Equals, that's the obvious one, right? And then a result. So results in, that's also implying that there's an equal sign there. Okay. All right, so let's throw this into an example here and try it out. A skydiving company has a profit of $750 this week. This profit is $900 more than the profit from last week. What equation can be used to find P? Well, let's first understand this problem. This week, we have a profit, which means we're in the positive range of $750. We've gained or earned that much money. But that $750 is more than $900 more than what we had last week. So what kind of number are we looking at having had last week in our profit? And if you think about that, the logical answer is, well, we didn't make money last week. We actually lost money. So we better have a negative answer, okay? What statement can we write? This profit, well, this profit is meaning the $750. So we're going to write 750 is, that's our equal sign, 900 more than, again, that's adding, the profit P from last week. So there's your equation. Solving it, we just subtract 900 from both sides to isolate that P, and we get $150 negative. So our profit from last week, we were down $150. All right, now let's let you give it a shot. So pause the video, try these 4 problems, and then we'll talk about them. Let me go ahead and move that so you can see them. All right, now you have it. That's how to write and solve simple equations using addition or subtraction. Thanks for joining me, Mrs. Struble with Struble Math.